Welcome to the Toronto Convergence at the Parliament of the World's Religions, a journey in waking up and growing up.
The world is warming up as we earn Mother Nature's wage.
So, what exactly do we mean by waking up and growing up? Well, this involves some fairly recent research that has given rise to one of the greatest and most profound understandings of spirituality that humans have ever had. This research is truly revolutionary in the deepest sense, and it promises to change how we see spirituality across the board. It has to do with the fact that human beings have two very different but equally important types of spiritual engagement. Namely, they can think about spirit or they can directly experience spirit. One is a knowledge by description. One is a knowledge by acquaintance. One is a third-person objective thinking about. One is an immediate first-person direct experience of. One is theological. One is mystical. Thinking about spirit, a knowledge by description, conceptual knowledge, is thinking about what Paul Tillich called one's ultimate concern. Ultimate concern being Tillich's term for spirit or ultimate reality. Whenever we do that, think about an ultimate reality, and whether we conclude there is one or isn't one, in either case, we are using our spiritual intelligence. Spiritual intelligence is one of perhaps a dozen multiple intelligences that all humans possess. We have a cognitive intelligence, an emotional intelligence, a moral intelligence, aesthetic intelligence, linguistic intelligence, mathematical intelligence, and yes, spiritual intelligence. And spiritual intelligence addresses the question, what is it that is of ultimate concern to me? What is ultimately real? And all the related questions, such as, what is the nature of this ultimate reality? How can I know this ultimate reality? And so on. Thinking about an ultimate reality produces all sorts of theologies, metaphysics, ontologies, and so on. And all of those make use of our spiritual intelligence. That spiritual intelligence is the first major type of engagement that humans can have with spirit. And it's part of what is called growing up, because it unfolds in a series of well-defined stages of growth and development, which we'll outline in just a moment. The other major type of spiritual engagement is not growing up, but waking up. Not third-person conception of spirit, but a first-person direct union or even identity with spirit. Not a thinking about spirit, but a direct experience of spirit. Not a knowledge by description, but a knowledge by acquaintance. This direct experience or realization of spirit is known around the world by various names: enlightenment, awakening, moksha, metamorphosis, self-realization, satori, the supreme identity, the great liberation. And whenever we have a direct waking up experience, we will end up thinking about that experience, interpreting it in various ways, building certain theories about it, and so on. In other words, we will use our spiritual intelligence to interpret our spiritual experience. We'll use the stage of growing up that we are at to interpret any waking up experiences that we have. Part of the recent research has been the discovery that although the various multiple intelligences or lines of development are quite different and cannot be equated, nonetheless, all of these different lines of development grow and progress to the same basic levels of development. There are several dozen models of these basic levels of growing up. But if you examine all of them, you'll notice there are around 6 to 8 major basic levels of development that you can find in most of these models. There are a great number of different names that can be given to these levels or stages of development because they cover a dozen different multiple intelligences with a different name coming from each of them. So remember that any names we use for these 6 to 8 stages will be very partial. But with that in mind, a common set of names for these stages of growing up are variations on those given by the pioneering developmental genius, Gene Gebser. The archaic stage, the magic stage, the mythic stage, the rational stage, the pluralistic stage, and the integral stage. And indeed, researchers such as James Fowler have found compelling empirical evidence that, in general, the typical person's own views about spirituality or ultimate concern go through at least 6 major levels of development. And these levels are exactly variations on the archaic, magic, mythic, rational, pluralistic, and integral stages. Some of the models of growing up have been tested in over 40 different cultures, with no exceptions found. These 6 to 8 stages are indeed universal and cross-cultural, and these different stages, as they show up in humans, deeply impact and profoundly govern how they think about, interpret, and experience spirituality. And, shockingly, not a single religion anywhere in the world knows this fact or has any understanding of the actual stages of growing up. And that is part of the stunning discoveries of this recent research. We'll come back to this truly crucial point. So human beings have at least these 2 major types of spiritual engagement, waking up and growing up. And they are indeed quite different. But here's why both of them are so significant. This recent research has demonstrated that these 2 developmental sequences are not only different, they develop in ways that are almost totally independent of each other. This is a staggeringly new piece of information. It means that you can be very highly developed in growing up or spiritual intelligence, and yet poorly developed in waking up or spiritual experience. You can have memorized all the Upanishads, the sutras, the Kabbalah texts, and the Sufi writings, and learned all about a new paradigm in science that totally supports the unified world of mysticism, and yet still not have had a single waking up experience. And vice versa. You can have had a significant number of waking up experiences, but still be at very low stage of growing up. And this becomes a real problem, because this research has also discovered that you will interpret whatever waking up experience you have according to the stage of growing up you are at. And this leads to some very alarming conclusions. So, as a quick example of exactly how growing up interprets waking up, let's use a very simplified summary of the stages of growing up. And this simplified summary, the 6 to 8 major stages of growing up are condensed to just 4 basic stages. And these are true enough. They're a good overview of growing up. They go from the egocentric stage, which is focused on just me, very self-centered, to the ethnocentric stage, focused not on just me, but on just us, or moving from an identity with only me to an identity with a whole group, my family, my clan, my tribe, my nation, my religion, my God, versus everybody else's. A strong us versus them mentality. Then from the ethnocentric to the world-centric stage, focused on not just us, but on all of us. Not just my group, but all groups, or all human beings, regardless of race, color, sex, or creed. And finally, from world-centric to integrated, which integrates all of the previous stages into a holistic unity. So these simplified stages go from me to us to all of us to integrated. Egocentric to ethnocentric to world-centric to integral. By way of contrast, take a typical enlightenment or waking up experience. The person goes from being identified with the individual ego, the separate self sense, to a sense of identity with spirit itself and with the entire world, often called cosmic consciousness or ultimate unity consciousness. But exactly how that ultimate unity state will in fact be interpreted depends upon the actual stage of growing up the person is at. Why? Because, remember, all spiritual experience is interpreted by one's spiritual intelligence, which is a multiple intelligence in the path of growing up. So one's growing up stage will interpret one's waking up experience. So, for example, if the person has a major waking up experience, but they are still at the egocentric stage of growing up, they will indeed feel that they are one with the entire world. But they think that they, and they alone, can have this experience. They can even think that they themselves are, for example, Jesus Christ, which often happens with schizophrenia. Ram Dass actually had a brother who was institutionalized with this problem. And Ram Dass said that when you met his brother, you could tell immediately that he had had a very real awakening experience. He said it was just totally obvious. The guy was absolutely alive with it. But Ram Dass's brother simply could not acknowledge that anybody else could have that experience, including Ram Dass. Here we see an authentic waking up experience, but interpreted from an egocentric stage of growing up. If the person continues to grow, however, and they reach the ethnocentric stage, then their identity has expanded from just their own ego to their whole group. Not all groups, just their own special group. And thus they will think that only members of their special group, or their religion, or their particular God, only that group can have the salvation of a real waking up experience. Hence, ethnocentric. If you are a fundamentalist Christian, for example, even if you have an authentic waking up experience and feel one with the entire universe, you will think that only those who have accepted Jesus Christ as their personal Savior can also have a waking up. Others may think that they can, but they can't really. Here we see an authentic waking up interpreted by an ethnocentric stage of growing up. If you continue to grow, however, and you move from the ethnocentric to the world-centric stage, if you move from just us to all of us, then you will see somebody like Jesus Christ as being merely one authentic world teacher among many other and equally authentic world teachers. You no longer ethnocentrically think that your belief and only your belief is ultimately true, and you alone have a lock on God. You shifted to a world-centric universal view, where God has appeared in many different but equally valid forms to all people around the world. The Catholic Church at Vatican II finally admitted this and stated, paraphrasing, comparable salvation can be had by other religions. And thus, after almost 2,000 years, they finally moved from ethnocentric to world-centric. So, at this stage, it's no longer necessary for somebody to believe in your particular God in order to experience the salvation of a genuine waking up. All that is required is that they be born a human being. Although a person at the ethnocentric stage still fervently believes that they and they alone have the one true way. So that ethnocentric stage of religion still continues to pit human being against human being and actually prevents a universal love and unity. And the alarming news, which we'll return to in just a moment, is that research indicates some 60 to 70% of the world's population are still at ethnocentric stages of development, not world-centric. And this is killing us. Finally, as we move from a world-centric to an integral stage, all of these previous stages are seen to be important since they all represent irreducible stages in a human being's overall growth and development. And you can't skip or bypass any of them. So, even using the simplified four-stage model of growing up, we can see that how one will interpret and therefore actually experience a genuine waking up depends on the stage of growing up that the person is actually at. And those stages differ dramatically from each other. Remember I said that no religion anywhere in the world has a real understanding of growing up? Waking up, yes. Growing up, no. Here's why. Because waking up experiences are immediate, direct, first-person experiences. Humans have been aware of waking up experiences going back thousands of years, at least to the earliest shamans. And virtually all of the major religions of the world have some sort of teachings on waking up. That's what makes them religions. But because the stages of growing up are third-person rules, they really can't be experienced. They're much more like the rules of grammar. And like grammar, you cannot see the stages of growing up by looking within or introspecting or meditating. Even though right now, every time you think or speak, you are following a huge set of grammar rules, you can't look within and see these rules. I mean, try it, but you're completely unaware of them, even though you're faithfully following them right now. Just so, when you're at a particular stage of growing up, you have no idea you are at that stage. You have no idea that you are interpreting your experience according to the hidden rules of the stage you are at. For this reason, the stages of growing up were not discovered until a mere 100 years ago. 100 years. And therefore not a single major religion or spiritual path anywhere in the world, most of which are over 1,000 years old, and therefore not one of them has included any understanding of these growing up stages, which are only 100 years old. And that means that there is not a single religion anywhere on this planet that trains people to both wake up and grow up. And thus the history of humanity to date has been a history of partiality, fragmentation, brokenness. We now know that waking up alone is not nearly enough for a real wholeness. And thus nowhere before this have we produced humans who were actually whole, complete, and unified. That is, who had included both waking up and growing up. And this is truly disastrous. And further, as we saw, and this is indeed alarming, some 60 to 70% of the world's population today are still at ethnocentric stages of development. And that means that the vast majority of people on this planet right now are actually using their religion as a way to divide and separate themselves from other humans, not as a way to unite humanity, but as a way to divide it, as a way to think that they and they alone have the one true path and the one true God, and that everybody else is off the mark. Under these circumstances, religion is not a source of human unity, peace, solidarity, or harmony, but just another source of separation, conflict, and ill will. Now, most of you attending this conference are at world-centric or integral stages of growing up, and thus you don't think this way. And you probably imagine that few others think this way either. But in fact, on average, some 70% of your followers do think this way, and it is killing humanity. And you can't simply teach people to say, everybody is one, or produce a list of tenets that you feel all the major religions agree on, and then have them memorize that. It instead is necessary for somebody to actually grow and develop to a real level where they see and feel that in their bones, where they know it by acquaintance, and not just a knowledge by description that they learn to repeat from you. In other words, until religion begins to teach its followers how to both wake up and grow up, religion will continue to be a major source of human division and conflict on this planet, and will not live up to its bright promise of unity, oneness, wholeness, and health. To really gather together the tribes, we will have to be not only at the higher states of waking up, we will have to be at the higher stages of growing up. And failing that, we will remain fragmented, partial, and broken, no matter how many waking up experiences alone that we have. This is the shocking new discovery that this recent research has uncovered. And this is the profound defect that any authentic and effective religion of tomorrow will have to address. And if it does so, religion will become a real conveyor belt of social transformation, helping people not only wake up to their own supreme identity, but also grow up to their own most inclusive, world-centric, and integral perspectives, a real uniting of the tribes through a journey of waking up and growing up, uniting both forms of their spiritual engagement, and hence discovering the greatest potential of wholeness, unity, solidarity, and spirituality that human beings have ever known in their entire history. This is the extraordinary possible future we have in front of us. And frankly, whether we get there or not is up to you.